You are listening to Healing with Haley, episode 37, The Life Coach Chronicles, Lacey Dean's Journey. Welcome to Healing with Haley. I'm your coach, Haley Kirk. On this podcast, we dive into ways to heal, embrace, and truly love our lives. Here's my belief. So much of our suffering comes from what we believe. I'm here to help you understand your mind and question those thoughts to start your healing journey. Ready to get started? Let's go. You guys, welcome to the podcast. I have a very special guest, Lacey. She's one of my good friends, and
Hello.
we met in the dance scene.
Oh my
Well, like a
gosh.
while ago, like 2 years ago,
Mhm.
yeah?
Oh yeah. Us having
Like
super
3
deep
years.
conversations on the side of socials.
Yes, soul sister right here. So I wanted to interview Lacey because we're both life coaches, and I'm like, it would be so cool to have two life coaches speaking about life coaching. So
Mhm.
Lacey, I want you to kind of dive into where the inspiration came from to start life coaching, what inspired you. Give us the origin story of your
Oh yeah.
superhero.
Oh yeah, it's twisty. No. So I myself am a child of complex trauma and abuse, and so I grew up without the skills that I really needed, just like through your upbringing that you learn that are modeled from parenting. There was a lot of like emotional neglect and just didn't know how to be a person in a healthy way. And so when I was my teenage years, early adult years, 20s, I really made a bunch of mistakes and it really freaking hurt. And I saw these patterns come up in me and I had no idea what any of this stuff was. So it wasn't actually until I started listening to podcasts that I recognized like there were terms for my family. And I was like, wait a second, what is narcissistic abuse? Like psychological abuse. What is this? I had no idea. I just thought that all of that was normal. And so I started diving into any and everything I could get my hands on. At the time I was married and my marriage was falling apart, and there was just patterns of dysfunction in every area of my life. I mentioned to you that I've been a nanny for 13 years. So that was a huge part of this recognition of the patterns, was seeing how these things were instilled in little people from just their environment and their people around them. I'd hear them modeling what their parents would say, or I'd see how the shame happened, and it would bring me back to my childhood. So I didn't even realize that I was kind of reparenting myself while being a part-time parent. And so it really made things make sense for me to go, wait a second, I was 7 years old when that happened. This kid is 7 years old. That was so unfair. And it really shifted my perception of my own experience. And then with everything kind of falling apart and burning down, it was the catalyst that I really needed to change my life. And it took a lot of pain and a lot of grieving. And, at first I didn't have the resources to have a therapist, so I did everything I could on my own. There's a lot of introspection, a lot of tears, a lot of praying, the word help, it was like everything burned down, and it needed to because I was starting over. And so I look at my life now and it's truly a testament of what is possible. I battled with addictions, I had eating disorders. There were so many things that I struggled with that I walked through. And I felt like I have a firm belief in God, the universe. And I know that in that time when I lost everything, I had literally nothing to my name. My husband said he wanted a divorce. The same week, I had the flu. My car got totaled. I was sleeping on a blow up mattress because we were trying to figure everything out. And I just prayed and was like, God, what do I do? And I felt so clearly this like mission statement of you're going to walk alongside of people that are surviving the dark that you walked through. And
Whoa.
I remember being like, what are you talking about? I'm in the dark. Like, this is me. I am the dark. Like, this is not. But it was such a clear message for me that, like, you survived all of this for a reason. You understand this now. You're passionate about it. I love this work. I love the psychology behind it. I love understanding people and just love people in general. So it's been such a beautiful progression to see. But I started life coaching 2 years ago. Um, and it's been the biggest privilege of my life, again, to like walk alongside of people and be able to mirror back, healthier ways to do the things that we all struggle with and the process that is life. So that's
Ah,
the
that's
origin
so
story.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. I love that. Okay. So Oh, that's such a cool origin story. So tell me, when you had this moment of like, it almost seemed maybe kind of like revelation was given to
Mhm.
you in a way, or kind of like an epiphany or like an aha moment where you were like, you're gonna help walk people through what you've walked through. So like, where were you? Like, how did that happen? Like, what was all happening in that moment?
I feel like there were multiple moments.
Okay.
Normally it was like rock bottom experiences.
Okay.
I always felt like there was this responsibility on my life. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Like I've always felt like I've wanted to do something meaningful in the world. I've wanted to do something like I can't just work in a job for money. I've always wanted to do something that mattered to me. And before, growing up, I always had done humanitarian aid. That's actually why I danced bachata and missions and lived in the Dominican Republic and did internships and things there. And I thought that was what I was going to do. And that was an escape for me. That was me running away from the dysfunction of my family and the environments that I knew. It was a very healthy escape, but it was an escape and it showed me a lot. It showed me values, it showed me culture, it showed me like a whole new world that was available to me. And I think in a lot of ways was a total saving grace. But again, those systems and patterns were so deep in me that it wasn't really until I was 25. I had gotten married really quickly for a lot of reasons. And we ended up, I had this narrative in my mind that is so deeply embedded in so many women of like, when I'm chosen by a man, then my pain will go away and I'll be good enough and the shame and the whatever. And it, of course, is not the case. It was actually the opposite, where I ended up resenting him because it didn't go away. And it was just the same patterns that I saw even in my parents' marriage that I resented. And I went, what the heck is this? And so there were many, many moments where I broke my own heart and I saw myself functioning in a way that just was like, I can't do this. I broke my own trust so many times. I struggled with addiction. I really, really, really struggled with my relationship with men. I had gone through a really just early 20s, going out, partying, all of that. And it broke me down because I had been put in situations that were dangerous and led to a lot of awful things. Um, and it really rocked my sense of trust within myself. And so I didn't really value myself. So when I got married, it was like the first time in my life that I felt safe enough to really look at the stuff because I knew he was a good guy. So there was all of this stuff coming up, and it was like, you either look at this or it's going to drown you. Like it was, and all of this happened really during the pandemic, like right when the pandemic hit. So I was stuck at home. I couldn't cope. I couldn't run away. I couldn't run to friends. I couldn't do all the things that I normally would do. And it was like, look, if you're going to do this, you got to look at the stuff head on. And I didn't even know what any of that meant at the time. It was literally just one step at a time. And, the whole point of my brand, I guess, or my podcast is that it's messy. It's going to be messy. You will be messy for the rest of your life. You're going to make mistakes forever. You're a human being. You will deal with difficulty forever. This is part of this experience. But learning to do it in a way that is more productive in the long term for us, that is not damaging to us, that allows us to respond instead of react, in that pattern. That's what it's about. So, like, there were many, many moments that just showed me this can't continue. I literally can't live like this. I was in so much pain. I didn't know what to do. And I was just reaching. And there were so many just like next steps that became available along that path of searching and seeking and reading and podcasts. And podcasts were a huge thing for me. So once I started hearing, like, wow, people are explaining my experience in their words, it was so powerful because it gave me the language to then go, oh, I'm allowed to have this too. I can be liberated if they're liberated from this. And that was really, it just was so gradual and it was so much, again, grieving and just like learning how to feel my feelings and do all these things for myself, that now I feel like I can actually walk people through it in a totally different way because I've been through it. I can hold that space. I'm not threatened by that depth, because I've been through what felt like the depths of hell so many times.
Yeah,
But no,
wow.
it was definitely many, many moments that just continued chipping away and confirming and yeah, but it's been bumpy. It's been bumpy.
Yeah. So was it like a internal voice, or kind of like, what was it that gave you that mantra you said for your life?
It definitely I always like to see it as um it's a very still small voice. That's the way the Bible refers to it, as like God. But there's a difference. I became mindful in 2020 because I felt like I was losing my mind, and I started meditating and doing things that were like more mindful practices. That was the
Yeah.
first time I ever really started becoming aware of the thoughts that were going on and just the constant anxiety that was just like looping. And then there was this one voice I heard like two or three times that was just different. And it was so gentle and quiet, but like pierced my heart in a way that I knew it wasn't from me, because I would have never thought that. In that moment, I would have never thought that. And so I firmly believe that that was God, because it came to pass. And it was an anchoring point for me to be able to be like, all right, God, what are we doing? Like, I don't know how this is going to work. I'm going to need you to do something about this. I fully trust that you can make miracles happen in my life. And I really struggled with my relationship with God because I struggled with the church and with religion. And so I had walked away from that. And that was God pursuing me over and over again, that like, it doesn't have to look like that for you to be with me. And like, your life will look different, but I see you and I have a plan for you. And that's kind of how it happened. It was very gradual, but I was very shut off to like the idea of God at that time in my life because I was in so much pain. Like, I didn't know what to do with any of it. And so it was just this slow chipping away through that gentleness and just like little moments. There were a few moments throughout 2020 that just broke me, that were so tender. And I know that at the time that would not have been my thoughts, because my thoughts were not nice at that time in my life. They were not nice. But yeah,
Yeah. So
so I look
so
at it
tell
like
me
it was
this.
God.
So then you're going on kind of like this like healing journey. And then at what point were you like, okay, let's build the practice, let's build the podcast. So like tell me about that journey.
What's crazy is I literally felt the push to do it. And then I saw less than a week later, this was before I had Googled or like looked anything up. So this is not an algorithm thing. This was not a Facebook is reading your mind thing. I saw an ad on Facebook for this woman's podcast program that was going to start in like 2 weeks. And I remember being like, huh, I'd never seen anything about a podcasting program, but it was like everything you need to learn to start a podcast. And because podcasts were so impactful for me, I always, had the gift of gab. I've always loved to talk. I've always, been told you should do something in speaking. So I'm like, okay, let me look at this. And I remember feeling like this magnetic pull towards this program in a way that like I could not deny. I did not have the money for it. I did not have any idea why I was where I was on the internet. Like, but I remember going, okay, like if this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm gonna do it. And it was just a blind step of like, I really feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, and really learning to trust my intuition. And I clicked submit on the credit card that I put this thing on. And I felt like, I can't explain it other than like I felt like everything in like a spiritual space was like, she did it in real time. Like, we
That's
didn't need to
awesome.
smack her upside the head with like a cosmic 2x4 to get her attention. Like, it was a positive reinforcement of like, this is the right step. Take the step. And I took the step. And so then it was just the most inspiring experience that I had ever had up until then, and was just surrounded by people with vision and surrounded by people that were doing the work, and just was such an incredible platform to also learn how to do this stuff. And I had invested in it, and that was kind of the final push of like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It definitely took about a year of me dealing with imposter syndrome and feeling inadequate of like, who am I to do
What is
this?
it for the people who don't know, what is imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is basically the feeling that like you're a fraud, that everybody's gonna see that you really don't know what you're talking about and you're just like ill-equipped to do this thing. When in reality, everybody feels that way. And it very often is just ego and it's our brain saying, hey, this is new and this is scary. So let's make it seem really, really bad so that you stay where you are and you stay safe. When in reality, of course, like it takes that, it's just like exercise. You tear the muscle to grow it stronger. You also have to push those limits to realize, like, oh, I didn't die. Like, oh, wait, I could do that. That was something I'm capable of learning and doing. But it's that fear of I'm a fraud. I'm gonna be caught, in some way for not knowing or not being able to help people in the way that I really want to. So there was a lot of insecurity that I was dealing with, and it really hindered me from stepping into that space with that because I very much was still in my own process. And I did have to take a time for about 8 months where I just paused. I had to really go deep because the podcast was gaining traction. I had clients, I was doing well, but it felt really heavy to me because I hadn't really learned how to sit in solution and how to feel the feelings. I had intellectualized a lot of the stuff that I had gone through, but I hadn't really felt it within the body yet, and I hadn't really learned that those were two different things. And so it
So
was
tell us
the
about that. What does that mean
yeah,
to like intellectualize versus like feel
yeah.
it in your body?
So that's like the number one place people go is they will intellectualize to, or just in the beginning stages of healing, it's let me understand what happened to me so I can make sense of it. Let me pick it apart. Let me do the loops. Let me, a lot of the anxiety that we feel is that it's the let me understand so that I can rationally get a grasp within my mind of what happened and why. Because maybe if I can understand what happened, then I don't have to feel how much it hurt. And
Mm,
so the reality of like feeling our feelings is the sensation of the emotion that happens in real time. And so a lot of people, including me, when I was dealing with addiction and I was dealing with a narcissistic father and I was told I'm not allowed to have needs and I had to constantly suppress and suppress and suppress and hide and substances and whatever to cope because I wasn't allowed to have those feelings. I wasn't allowed to experience my life because I was constantly told that experience was invalid, that I wasn't allowed to have that I was being dramatic, whatever that narrative was. So I was just suppressing all of that down. And in the nervous system, whatever you suppress on an emotional level, it literally builds energy and will come back up threefold the next time around because your body needs to feel it. It's data. And so it's all data to reflect what is actually happening within you in response to your life. So your feelings are what is life without a feeling, right? We can't just logically think about everything. The thoughts do create feelings. So often in the body, the way that feelings actually happen is that we have a thought first. It can be a subconscious thought, it can be so deep we're not aware of it. A lot of our thoughts are not actually known to us. We really only know about 5% of the thoughts that we're thinking. There's a whole world of things that are just on a loop within us. That's why looking at those origin stories and looking at the roots of things is so important because we don't even realize that that's still there
mm,
until we bring it into a conscious space. So when we suppress those feelings over and over and over again, or we're not allowing the body literally the data it needs to just exist in the world, to feel safe in the world, to build the tools in the moment to react to the world and respond to what's happening because we're not actually in it. When we live in reality, we feel real things. And so when we don't know how to feel the sensation, so much of what we do to run and to cope is because we don't want to feel pain. We don't want to feel discomfort. I don't want to feel like this wave is going to just take me over and drown me. And I feel like it's just a black hole that I'm never going to get out of. If I touch that area, it's too painful. I can't do it. So many people have something like that. And it's just recognizing that, like, that's a valid pain that a deep part of you needs acknowledged and needs to see compassion and empathy. And when we do it from that perspective, it's like we recognize that those parts of us are scared kids. We recognize that they're just parts of us that need love and need our acknowledgement and tenderness and need a parent to say, I see you, I'm not going to leave you here. And learning to look at it that way is like we can logically understand. We are rational. It's important, of course, to understand, but learning to feel the feelings within the body is learning how to acknowledge the physical sensation when it's coming up, learning what those sensations are, and then also being mindful of what that connection is between the thought. Because I can also create feelings, like if I stalk my ex on Instagram, right? Like that's going to immediately create a feeling within my physical body. But that's because I followed the lead of the thought instead of consciously choosing and then sitting with the feelings that are just natural to the response of my life, if that makes sense. I hope that
Yeah.
made sense.
No, it totally does. It totally does. So, so then when you are coaching as a life coach, I so want to hear this. So like, what are some of your struggles or like your least favorite parts of life coaching? I want to hear
Oh,
this one.
oh, that's juicy.
It's like
Okay.
life coaches gossiping on
Yes, the
the side.
tea. I'm like never ever naming names. I love all my people.
Of
Um,
course.
no, so what I do and very intentionally is I will screen people. I think it's really important, just like in therapeutic relationships, you have the right relationship.
Yeah.
If you are working with somebody, you need to feel safe. You need to feel like you can be yourself. You need to feel like you can be challenged and that, you're willing to do the work with this person, right? Be vulnerable,
Mhm.
show up. And honestly speaking, I don't want people's money. I want their transformation. And so when people come to me and they're
Oh,
willing to pay for the work they're not willing to do, it's a waste of everyone's time. So if you
wow.
want
Okay, say
to,
that again. I actually needed to hear that. So
I
you're
don't want your
invested in their
money, I
transformation.
want your transformation. So if you're not willing to do the work, I don't want your money. It's a waste of your
Yeah.
time. It's a buffer for what you really need, which is, are you going to do what is necessary to fight for yourself? Are you willing to do the work, which is hard? And
It's so hard.
again, it's not going to happen overnight.
No,
It's not going to be perfect. There will be times where you say, Lace, I can't do this. And I'm like, I'm here with you. Let's sit, let's grieve, let's cry, let's whatever. But there's a difference between a heart that is leaning into it and somebody that is stuck within a belief and a narrative of being a victim. And I say this as somebody who quite literally was a victim many, many times. That was my identity. I identified with my trauma. So I can't talk anybody into healing. I can't tell you you're worth it. I can scream it on the rooftops 1,000 times. If you don't want to do this, then you're wasting your time. And I
wow,
want you to,
girl,
like, I want you
that's
to
so
do
powerful.
this
Yeah.
so bad. But
So,
so much of my early coaching was like, let me show you why you're worth this. And people were like, yeah, but like, I got back together with my toxic ex, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
yeah.
But people have to make their own decisions, and that's their own timeline. And I think it's hard to really release the control and just trust that, like, people's process will be what they need it to be, and their timeline will be, and ideally creating that space that they know I'm here, and that is my heart, but really wanting clients that take it seriously,
So
because
what do
they're
you do when you
worth
have a
that.
client who's not taking it seriously?
I think what I've done in the past, I had one client that I did have to say it was just the same conversation every week. And, I told her, I was like, what do you view the outcome of this to be? Like, what are you, and there was zero desire to do any action. A lot of coaching, I feel like, is, in therapy, a lot of times you go back and you deal with the past. A
Right.
lot of coaching is also dealing with action and movement to create the future. And
Right.
so if there is no desire to make different choices, you will have the exact same life that you resent. If you don't like your choices, you're not going to like your life. And if there's again, no desire to take accountability, that's really what it is. Is I just kept asking questions that would lead her back to herself, and she would see it. And she would just basically say, I don't want to do it. And so I had to say, I don't think this is the right space then. to be in, because at the end of the day,
How
it's
many
not.
conversations did you have to have with her like
We
that?
had a whole like container. So we had, I think she had 10 sessions, and it was a lot of it was again her speaking and talking. And it's so hard because like you really want to create that space where you can build that relationship and you can really get to the roots of things. And but it was, I know it was more of, I know this is toxic and I don't care. And that to me, for me, is like, okay, I have limited time and I have limited capacity, and I want to help people that are willing to do the work. I am so committed
When
to
you say,
doing.
I know this is toxic and I don't care, this is like
This was her
she's saying
verbatim.
this.
Yeah. Like, I know this
Wow.
is unhealthy. I see what it is. Again, a lot of logic, a lot of knowledge, a lot of verbiage, but not a willingness to actually take accountability. And everybody will do that differently. 1% accountability, I would have been like, let's go. Like, we're still here, you know? But I can't fight for you if you're not fighting for you. It's
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
codependent thing. That's not fair for me or for you, because then what ends up happening is it's a buffer for them. And
Right.
sometimes it buffers the discomfort of, sometimes you get a.
Explain that term for
Yeah.
people who might not know.
So like the way that I kind of look at it is, it's kind of like venting, right? Have you ever had somebody like trauma dump a bunch of really heavy stuff or really hard stuff on you, and then you're like, whoa, you know? But then they don't want any feedback. They just want to be heard, which again, there's a time and a place that we just share and we hold that space together. But if it's, let's say, the same friend saying that over and over and over and over and over again, consistently, at a certain point the other party will say like, look, something has to give, right? Either like, why are we choosing this? There is accountability and agency. We have choices in life, and we have to really look at that and be like, what am I choosing? Why am I choosing this? If it hurts, I'm not forced to be here. Like, what am I doing this for? And it's like somebody continually trauma dumping. For them, they might have this momentary relief because they're sharing the weight of that pain or that burden with you. But then you're carrying this and they're feeling this relief, and it's buffering the discomfort instead of really allowing them to take accountability, to say, hey, like, honest in love and in so much grace, do you see what's happening? Like, why are we choosing this? I love you. I'm worried that, like, I'm noticing that this is the same story over and over and over again. And I care about you too much to say, like, do you want to, like, can I share this? This is something I'm seeing, kind of thing. And a lot of times when people just it's because they don't really want to look at it. They just want that relief. They want the little bit of like, of that emotional buffer that like, you're holding it with me so I don't have to look at it. I'll just come back and keep venting. I'll just come back and keep dumping. And it's like, we're not actually doing anything with it. And there's a space at that point, you are living in that space. And there's a space that, yes, you share. There's a space that, yes, you are in community and you have that support. But it's also just like, at what point are you identifying with choices? Are you identifying with pain? Are you identifying with certain narratives, which is completely your right to do? That is you have every, no, there's people that will spend their whole life and never reach a healthy place within themselves, or never reach a place of wanting to do the work. It's just too much. Not everybody wants that. But for me, I know the people that I want to serve are the people that are desperately seeking the way that I sought, that are desperate. They will do anything to get out of the places that they're in. And that's the person I will give 900% to. I will give everything to, because I have limited time and energy, and I value this work so much that it's like, if you want to stay in that cycle, you have agency and choice. You are an adult. You have every right to do that. But it's not fair to me, and it's also not fair to other people that really
Yeah.
want the support. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That are
So
ready to like dive in.
how do you screen people?
Yeah, I normally do a discovery call, and
Okay.
I'll ask people like, what are the goals? What are we thinking? How are we feeling? Like, what are the things that you are noticing, or certain issues that are that are coming up for you. There are certain like non-negotiables that I have in the sense of it's just out of my field of what's the right word? It's out of my lane. It's just too much.
Yeah.
You need a
Yeah.
therapist. If you are dealing with personality disorders or any diagnosis that's just like you need to be working with a licensed therapist, then that's something in general. If there's any previous diagnosis that's just again too much for coaching field versus like actually working with a psychiatrist or therapist. People that are really actively dealing with suicidal ideation, that's another thing too, where it's like you really need to be stable for us to dive in. You have to have a certain level of safety, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I always will ask people when they share what the problem is, I'll say, what have you done to address that? What have you done to find some form of like have you done anything to respond to that problem? And a lot of times the people, it's very clear, the people that do, well, I don't have any money and I can't have a therapist and I just am really tired and I work all the time and I just don't. And that answer versus yeah, so I've been reading this podcast or I've been reading this book and I saw this YouTube video and I do like there's a desire to do something, to learn, to want it, to you see the energy on people of like I'm seeking a solution to this issue
Mm-hmm.
versus I want to perpetually live in victimhood. There is
Mm-hmm.
not a willingness to take accountability yet. Again, you can be very clear in that process and be like, are you 100% committed to show up? And that also means the truth in love. I am not here to be the bad guy. I don't want to be hard. Like that's the last thing I want to do. I feel like so much of coaching is just asking really good questions to lead people back to themselves because they have to discover this on their own time, right? I can't tell
Mm-hmm.
you what's right for you. You have to discover that. And we discover that together by just me being a mirror and asking questions and getting curious together and looking at the roots and doing all this work together and like providing a template for that.
Yeah.
But
So as a life coach, like if someone's like an aspiring life coach, what are some of your like, you need these 5 things to start a really good, like a good start for a life coach business?
oh, take your own healing so seriously.
It's a
You
good one.
cannot give anything you do not have. Your baseline, your template, whether you know it or not, you will project it onto people. And a lot of people that go into helping spaces have really deep roots of codependency and they think they're doing it from a genuine space, which is, again, not. I was that person where I was taking on the weight of the world because I had to take on the weight of my dad and be responsible for this unhealthy person. So I felt like, okay, if I can fix all these unhealthy people, then maybe one day my dad can be fixed too and he can love me, right? Like that was the deep
Right.
internal belief that I had was if
Yeah.
I can make all these people right, then there's hope for my dad. When in reality, that was a deep codependency in me that I had to learn I am not responsible for anybody's healing. I can lead a horse to water and I cannot make it drink. I am not responsible for the outcome. I can give everything I can give, and I have to be at peace in knowing that I'm doing it from a genuine heart space because I'm checking my heart often for myself, not for my job, not for my clients, for myself. My practice is the number one thing to live in integrity in this business because you will be challenged all the time. When your clients are going through something hard, when your clients are struggling, that's a constant just buff it's a constant mirror to you and just friction within your own stuff too, which is why this work is also so beautiful, but it's so important that we have practices and structure to then support us in our own transformation as we're walking with others transforming because we're never done. I still have so many things I'm working through and working on always and forever. So it's
Mm.
how do I live in that humility of acknowledging that I will never be fully done this process while also being able to help others. So my practice would
Beautiful.
definitely be prioritizing our own practice, our own grounding, so that we don't project our stuff onto people and we really create the safety and the container to then do the transformative work and it not be about us because it's not
Yeah.
about us. So
Okay, I
that's
like
a
number one.
huge, I think that's definitely the biggest and most foundational piece. Um, Boundaries kind of go
Me
into
too.
that.
Boundaries.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's
boundaries,
good.
because the second, and I honestly had to take a break from social dancing for a little bit because I became known as like the life coach, and it was like, oh, I'm about to have a panic attack, but Lacey's here. And it would just turn into that. And I love like being a person that people feel safe and comfortable with, but I have a limited human capacity and I can't hold the weight of the world, especially when I'm working with little people still 3 days a week. And then I'm working with, like, it's
Yeah.
just too much. So having boundaries will also weed out the people again that we mentioned that are not actually really committed to this yet. And maybe they get to it, but it's that little push of like, oh yeah, I know you're really struggling. Of course, in the moment, if you need to have the conversation, right? Like, not saying you don't have friendships and people that you do this stuff with too, but at the end of the day, it is a different dynamic. So it's like, if you really want to do this, book a call. And then you see the people that like really want to do it and really want to dive in versus like, oh, I just wanted somebody to vent to, you know?
That's so awesome.
So boundaries, because it's just too much. It's just too much. Um, Especially if you enjoy what you're helpful to people. Like, it helps. And so of course you want to help if it's in your hands to help, but you are not Superman and you have to say no sometimes. Um, so boundaries, I definitely think just learning, being a forever learner is huge because again, you can't give what you don't know. So just try to the best of your ability to continue learning
Hmm.
about the body, about the brain, about why these things happen. I think another huge component of all of coaching, and I think any therapist as well, should be trauma informed. A lot of people, there's something called trauma informed care, and there's certain principles that you can get trained in about what trauma informed care is and how to create the safety for people to be where they are without re traumatizing and triggering them to the point of just no return, especially people that have had awful, awful therapeutic experiences or been invalidated in just such vulnerable places when they needed safety and support. I think that the more we understand trauma and the more we understand how crucial it is that people are bringing the fullness of themselves to us, it's sacred ground. It really is sacred ground. So when we look at it like that, we can understand like people are bringing forward the biggest pain of their life and we get the opportunity to hold it and speak to it, you know. That's really powerful and we shouldn't take that lightly. um and I think that was what, number 3 or number 4, I don't remember. But
That's four. Hmm.
the final thing is that be ready to lose some people, in the sense that this work will force you to grow and it will force you to, it's never, ever, ever. It's just you have to have a sense of humility. You have to have an awareness of like your humanity, that you don't have all the answers, you don't have it all figured out, but this will force you to grow. And what I've learned in my experiences is like I've had a lot of friendships and a lot of things in my life that were very unhealthy and I just didn't know it, and or I didn't have those boundaries for myself. I didn't prioritize the things that were important to me, like sleep. And so once I actually said, "Hey, no, I can't do that tonight because I need to wake up early to do this recording or whatever," it became a problem. And me prioritizing what I needed and the growth that I needed, or healthy conversations and wanting to create that safety in relationship, and not being met with people that shared that same value or had that same desire to grow, that were people that I'd loved for decades. Like, just because you're doing it, not everybody's going to be supportive of that. I think that was something that was hard for me to see. Like, felt like I got so much support from strangers on the internet, and yet like people that I'd known forever, it just felt like this, you wanted more support from them, but in a lot of ways, they also are just in their own journey and path, and they might not want to do that. And so you're going to grow and change and evolve because that's just part of this work. And be willing to know that, like, sometimes those friendships and those people also grow and change and evolve, and it's going to be the best thing that happens, even though it's hard at the time. And it can happen in a way that's loving. It doesn't have to be like, I'm here, but no, I can communicate, I can attempt repair, I can try to set boundaries and be clear and respect their boundaries and be, authentic and where I'm at. And sometimes people's answer is just they don't want that. And they can be people you deeply love, but things have greatly shifted for me in every area of my life since I started doing that work. And it's been the best thing that could have happened, but it's also been a lot of change and it's been hard, you know?
Wow.
So,
And
yeah.
so when you say be ready to lose people because of how you're gonna evolve, or
Yeah.
how is it like how both people are evolving, or why do you say emphasize that part?
I think that you just start to see things differently. It's just like any type of when you're aware of something and when you see something, you can't unsee it. In the sense of like, let's, for example, when I started recognizing there were terms for narcissistic abuse and gaslighting, I saw when my dad did that and I went, that's gaslighting. Like, I know what that is, you know? And it's just, I couldn't not see it because I had now been aware of it. So for me, when I'm becoming aware of my own patterns, this was very real for me in relationship. I always was attracted to unavailable men because my dad was an unavailable man. And it was, who do I need to be to earn your love and do that? And so once I started learning to have self respect and boundaries and regard for myself, I had people in my life that did not have that regard for me. And I had to say, actually, no, I don't want to be treated this way and I won't be talked to like that. Or, no, I really feel used because the only time you text me is after 11 p.m. Like, I'm not going to respond unless you actually are trying. And it was like, am I willing to do the hard thing that is the right thing overall now that I'm aware of something that needs to shift? And once we become more aware of just the areas that we need to grow, and we're seeing the way that our clients are growing, and we see that constant mirror of like, they're bringing something forward that then brings something up in me. And then I go, oh man, I have that too. And then you just think about it in a different way. You see it much
Mm-hmm.
more than if you are just in a regular job because you're not doing this kind of introspective work all the time and you
Right.
just see it more. And so then you see more things. But I say this to say you will lose people and there will be transitions, but
Yeah.
you
So
will
you'll lose
also
people in your
have,
life and
but
then
you will
also
also
clients as
gain.
well.
Well, I wouldn't say you would lose clients as much as like, I feel like a lot of times when you do,
Interpersonal.
it's just more like you will evolve, you will change, you will grow, you
Mm-hmm.
will evolve. And that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
you be willing to just be willing to change. It might not be bad, it might not be
Yeah.
loss necessarily, but it's change, I guess, more than loss.
Yeah.
Because you will also gain beautiful people that are on this path too. Like I have people that are like family to me. And it's just, I've noticed that that circle has just gotten a little smaller, but
Mm-hmm.
they're the people that are on that path and in alignment with that heart that I have that we can share in a level of depth that I could not have with those other friendships just because we were just
Mm.
in different places and we wanted different things out of life. And again, that's okay. It's just being willing to see it for what it was versus like, it's okay, it's no big deal. I can keep doing this and it won't impact me when it was impacting me. And now
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. So it's like, what am I going to do? You know?
Right. So, okay. So then how, like, what are the steps, like practical steps? So if someone's like, I want to start a life coach business, how do they, like, how did you start getting clients? What's your process?
So when I first started, honestly, a lot of people that I started working with were word of mouth. So I
Okay.
was bold in saying when I would talk to people, they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a life coach," you know. And I owned that thing right away, even though at the time I was like, "I have no clients, and I just have a podcast, and I'm trying my best." I got a few people through the podcast. Social media is also that honestly was the only way that the podcast. I wasn't really marketing the podcast, but it grew via social media and just consistently posting on there, which that can be, who knows how the algorithm and all the things work, but that's consistently been something that like don't be scared to shoot a shot. I do that kind of goes back to like working with family and friends though, like be mindful, if there's a relationship there, it's kind of like with therapy, they're like it's a conflict of interest,
Totally.
um, but if you're in settings like going to marketing events, doing things like that where it's like you are a life coach. This is where doing the work and embodying that and looking at like that insecurity or those beliefs. You are a life coach if you are deciding to step into the space, if you're doing the steps to be in this space, own it. You have things that help people. And so then it was that confidence that people just in life I would show up with. And then people are like, I like the way you talked about that. Or I like the way, and it led into, well, I'm a life coach. And then that, kind of led into those conversations. There's a million ways you can go about doing it. But I think in general, just having consistent content in a in any kind of online space, I feel like is good for just kind of building rapport because people can get an idea of who you are. I really recommend people have a podcast if they do, because again, people just get a feel if they resonate with you. Like clients that resonate with you might not resonate with my content, right? But like the right people will resonate with what you have if that's the person that needs to work with
Yeah.
you. Like not every client is your client. You don't want to just work with anybody. You want to work with the people that really are in alignment with the ability that you have. And I think
Mhm.
I do firmly believe that happens when we function within that space is the people that are drawn to us tend to be the people that are like, you don't really have to set those boundaries very often because by just doing the thing, you're already kind of setting them. I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's like you're just embodying that. And so the
Mhm.
people uh that aren't drawn to that often just don't get drawn to that. But I would say just in general, start somewhere, even if it's online. When I first started coaching, I offered 3 people free sessions just to practice because I was like, I just want to practice. They were probably awful. I didn't really know what I was doing, but like you're gonna be new and just get used to the growing pains of like nobody knows what they're doing at the beginning of anything.
Right.
Um, and it's okay to be a person and to make mistakes. So be honest. If you're nervous, tell your client like, "Hey, I'm feeling a little nervous." Like it's if
Uh,
anything, it opens up vulnerability of like, I'm gonna be straightforward and real with you, and I want you to be real with me. And it really builds like a beautiful relationship. So I think more than anything, it's just consistency. It's a long haul game. There's a lot of great books. There's a book called Prosperous Coach, which I always recommend. It's really good.
oh, cool.
Um, which I wish I remember that. I think Levin is the last name is the author, but always, always, always recommend that book. I've read it like 3 times. But yeah, I think it's a long-term game. Like if you're in it for the long haul, it's gonna be bumpy. I
Is it
personally like
prosperous coach, increase income and impact
Uh-huh.
for you and your
Richard,
client?
I think it's Rich
Litvin?
Levine. Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
That's
Um,
okay. Okay,
it's a
yeah.
really
I
good
always
book, but
I love putting books in the notes. I'm like, oh, this is so good.
I'm such a nerd. I read like it's my job. I love
Ooh,
a good
okay, okay.
book.
What's your favorite book?
Oh man, my favorite book. I don't
Okay,
know if I
top
can
three. I'll
pick.
give you top three.
Okay, top 3. I'm like looking at all my books right now. Okay, so I'm currently reading. I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but I love it's a really good book. Called How to Talk with Anyone About Anything. And
Mm.
it is all about safe communication and safe dialogue. And so, how do
Oh,
we create the space and
yeah.
also the actual skills to have conversations about things we deeply disagree on and how to reach understanding, how to empathize with others? I think, especially in this day and age, is very much lacking because everything is so polar. So, how can we really see each other and hear each other and create so much goodness comes from that. So much creativity and problem solving comes from that when people feel heard and understood instead of judged and defensive.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, I'm almost done with that one. Um, there's like, I literally am looking and I feel like I have to look up anything from Brene Brown. Love
Yeah.
Brene Brown. Um, anything from Brene Brown. Gifts of Imperfection is really good. That was one of the first ones that I read from her because I know I deeply resonated with like, what do you mean there's gifts in all my mess ups? I needed to hear that. Let me think. There's a lot. I have a lot of books. I listen to a lot of books too.
That's how I read.
Yeah, I listen
Read.
to a lot of Atomic Habits also. Again,
Oh,
it's like New York Times, everything. Everybody and their mother has talked about it, but
it's such a
Atomic
good one.
Habits
Yeah.
is so good.
I
Because
read it.
again,
I have me and my clients read it in like the middle of December. So we just like set January, like balls ablazing.
It's like really just helps break it down. Like this is actually
Oh,
how your brain does habits. So if you want to make changes, there has to be changes in certain ways for your brain to do changes. Like,
the game changer for me, like honestly, if I could just take one thing from that book is the 2 minute rule. I love the 2 minute rule. So it's like if you want to run a marathon, get in the habit of putting your tennis shoes on. And it's like it
mm-hmm.
takes 2 minutes. And it's crazy how much it works as a mom too, because if you're like, okay, the kids are in bed. I'm exhausted. I don't want to clean. And I'm like, just do two big dishes. Just two. That's it. Just two big dishes. And I'm like, I can do two big dishes. And then once I do the two big dishes, I can literally quit.
Uh-huh.
But I just finish everything. I'm like, well, I'm here
Right.
already.
You're
So I'm
already
like,
there.
well,
Yep.
no, it's
Momentum has happened.
crazy.
Yep.
It's crazy that that thing has been a game changer. And I've applied that rule for the gym, for eating habits, for coaching, for any
Mm-hmm.
business endeavor. And it's like, okay, just 10 minutes of choreographing, or
Right.
okay, 10 minutes of like marketing, you know? And it's just like, well, I'm already here. Might as well bust this out.
Right. Might as well. Yeah. It's that what's the point of entry or barrier of entry is that like just make it as easy as it can be. If you want to work out, do two squats. And people are like, two squats? I can do more than two squats. Of course you can. But you're
Yeah,
starting with two, and then you'll see you'll do more than two, you know? Like it's just make that
right.
barrier to get in so
Yes.
low versus like,
Yes.
I have to go to the gym 7 days a week and I gotta do this. It's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it's not
Yeah, and it's so
sustainable.
funny because I love that he said like you actually can stop once you set that two squat example. It's like, no,
Right.
no, like that's good. Like reward
You
yourself.
did
Like
it.
you actually
Yeah.
did what you said you would do. And that's the
Right.
reward in itself. And I was like,
Yep. It's the baby dopamine hits. We gotta hack the brain. I'm like, give me the little dopamine I can get. I'll take it. But that, like, check the box. Feel good about the
oh,
box instead of like, I
doesn't it
should
feel
be
so
doing
good to
more.
just like
Oh, I love it. I have lists for everything. It's my little ADHD brain. If I don't have it on a list or on the calendar, it does not exist. And I
oh
like to check
yeah,
it.
same. Yeah. I'm
I
like,
like to
oh,
check
that's the power of a calendar. So let me let me dive into the podcast. So what if someone's like an aspiring podcaster, there's a listener that's like, oh, like I want to start a podcast, that'll be so cool. Like, what are the go-to things they need and just all the things? Give us the deeds.
I think it's always easier than we think it is. Um, Definitely a microphone. It doesn't have to be crazy. There's so many on Amazon, but the quality of audio is the number one reason why people won't listen to a podcast. If the
Mm,
audio isn't very good, then they're like,
mhm.
if you're hearing like a high buzzing sound in the background, you probably are going to turn it off. Um, there's an audience for everything. I've seen this over and over and over again. I mean, just look at YouTube, right? There are people making millions of dollars like looking at kids' toys, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you guys have figured something out. This is great. I love that for you. So, there's an audience for everything. If you think it's dumb, there's probably an audience for it. If you have a passion about it and you feel like it doesn't exist in the world, then you're the person that needs to create it. And so, really lean
Yeah.
into that. But
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be hard. You can use your phone. So there's a few different awesome ways that if you need to, like the hardest thing for me and my little neurospicy ADHD brain is the editing part. And so video editing for some reason is way more fun to me. It just is. But audio editing is like, I hate it to
Same.
my core. And so I had somebody, I think I got it off of Fiverr, that he edited it for like $10. And it was the best $10 I ever spent because it got me like 7 hours of my life back. But
So you have him do it every episode?
so he did when I was just doing audio, he did it
Oh,
every
okay.
episode. Now I've transitioned. Now I just started a YouTube channel, so everything is
I
going to
saw
be video.
that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We'll talk about
So
that after.
yeah, so I transitioned to I want to grow primarily. The podcast was doing great on Spotify and on Apple, but
Yeah.
in general, video content is kind of like the push that they're hoping for now. More people just tend to be drawn to more video content.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just a different dynamic.
It so is. Yeah.
You see things in a different way. But yeah, so I started doing that. And so the same episodes that are going to be posted on YouTube will also be posted onto Spotify and Apple. It just will also include the video content, but it's
That's
going to be the
so
same
cool.
stuff. So it's just going to be all throughout, when before it was just the audio. So it now I only have to edit the video and don't have to do just audio anymore. So I don't actually mind that. It's been fun.
That's so cool. So
Um,
you upload your video into YouTube and then from YouTube it posts to Spotify
I
and
have to do it through a different, it's Spotify for podcasters. They have a system that distributes it throughout whatever platform you want it to go to. So I think I have Google Podcasts too.
mm-hmm,
Anything that you have attached to that,
mm-hmm.
you'll upload it there and it will disperse it throughout whatever platform. So for me, it's just those two separate from YouTube. YouTube is kind of its own thing you have to do to the side, separately.
Okay, okay.
But yeah. So yeah, it's really not as hard as it seems. I think just start because you're gonna get better as you go. You're never gonna be ready for any of this, like 100%. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, trying to be ready and prepared is great. Trying to learn is great, but at a certain point, you gotta just do it. And sometimes I look back at my old stuff and I'm like, it's cringy. And I don't feel like that anymore. I feel so cringy. But I learned, you know?
Yeah,
So, and by no means, like, it just shows that I was willing to try. So,
yeah, totally.
and that there's growth. So we can celebrate that because I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
But you just got to start. At some point, you just do it.
Yes, yes, yeah. So okay, so you started doing the video podcasting.
Mhm.
So is that what is that like a marketing strategy or like what got you
Yeah.
into that?
So I was looking for just numbers wise. I had this realization last year that like it's like mind blowing to me. The podcast was in 21 countries, and I was like, this is crazy. So if I were to have done those numbers on YouTube, I would have monetized just from ads. So like when you
Wow.
have that's a platform that people, when they support you on that platform pays the content creators once you reach a certain threshold of
Yeah.
like hours and subscribers via ads and also like brand partnership. It's just a bigger reach. The algorithm
Wow.
reaches a little bit bigger. It's not like a podcast where unless you're really looking up for something specific, it just is a bigger reach. You're being recommended more things. People and so I was thinking, like, if I have these numbers here, if I continue doing that, and also I really just want to incorporate more interviews and do more things like that, that it allows me to do this in a more passive way on top of coaching. So I really am looking for long term, like how to make this sustainable for me and how to make this something that's like building this content in a way that exists in the world, but that is also able to be discovered in a way that's not just like me pushing it out all the time, you know?
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
that YouTube is a great way to do that. And they, have that incentive of like you get paid for doing what you do if you get
So
to,
cool.
a certain point. So that's kind of why I made that shift. But
That's
ideally,
so
I
awesome.
love what I do, but it's also just more fun to do video. I just think it's more fun.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I'm learning so much from you. Um, so where can people like find you and reach you if they want, if they're like, I need Lacey as my life coach, or they have questions about the podcast. So how can people reach
Yeah.
you?
Of course. So I primarily use Instagram more than anything. I'm in the process of setting up website and all that jazz, but you can either email me or Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Lacey Dean Coaching, and same name on TikTok, same name technically on YouTube, but the YouTube channel and the podcast is called Get in the Mud. Get in the Mud, and on YouTube it just says Get in the Mud with Lacey Dean. So you can find me there if you want more content there. And we kind of go into some deeper dives into all of this and just like working through these things. So I just did an episode on 10 things I desperately wish I knew in my 20s. I just finished recording an episode with another awesome creator about the joy of healing and why healing is worth the grief and like worth the effort and the other side of what is possible. And also, I wear a ring on my finger because I made commitments and vows to myself and like shared
Ooh.
in a video about what those vows mean to me and why we should care about the commitments we make to ourselves because we're that template of our decisions in our life. So that's kind of just like an idea of what we talk about on the podcast. But yeah, so if you want to book a call or to do anything in regards to life coaching, normally reach out to me either on my email, which is just laceydeancoaching@gmail.com, or on my Instagram, and we can connect from there.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we should do this. What are like, if you could whittle down what you do in your life coaching business, or like if someone was like, what's something that could like change my life in like 5 tips?
Ooh.
What would they be?
Like 5 tips for them to do to change their life,
Yeah,
kind of
like
thing.
like from a life coach, these 5 things. If you could do these five, I don't know why five is a thing today,
Five's
but
the number.
these 5 things, um, like advice from a life coach, 5 things, and this will totally change your life and start a healing journey. What would it be?
Okay. Number one thing is safety. It's the number one part of any relationship. And so that is the foundational piece of relationship. Do you feel safe within yourself? Do you feel safe within your life? And do you feel safe within your decisions? And start looking at where in your life you don't feel safe within yourself, within your decisions, and within your thoughts. Because that will break your trust. That will break. You need to have, in order to have a healthy relationship with yourself, you need to feel safe and be present in those decisions. So, looking at like, do you feel safe? Do you actually trust yourself? And if you don't, where and why? And that's a really good place to start and become introspective about and journal about and just talk about with either a life coach or therapist, because safety is the foundational piece of all relationships. So if you don't feel safe within yourself, you will not feel safe within your decisions and in your life. And that's kind of where confidence, where all of these things come from, is the knowing that when things come, I can confront it and I can deal with it, and I have the tools and I have the groundedness to really face life when it happens, because it will happen. So safety, cultivating safety within ourselves, cultivating some form of mindfulness practice or introspective practice. We have to slow down to speed up. If we ever, like, everything in our life is fast, it's stimulating. Our brain is on all the drugs of dopamine all the time. Literally looked up today, like, how to get off my phone, because so much of what I do is on my phone, and I feel like I'm just sucked into the phone all the time.
Yes.
But slow down and see how, wherever you resist, I posted this on my Instagram the other day, show me the areas in which you resist stillness, and I'll show you the patterns that are running your life. So,
Wow.
where are you resisting stillness? And why we resist it, again, is I don't want to feel that feeling that comes up when I'm still. When in reality, the feeling has the key that you need. It's the grief that needs to just be seen and held. It's the learning how to do that that gets us past that and through that. Like, that's the key. So, learning to be still, learning to question our thoughts and just be curious about our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess point three would kind of go into that, is you are the observer, not the judge. So
Yeah.
within yourself, you have an inner child, a higher self, a true self, that at your core of cores, if you think about who you were as a kid, I refer to myself very often as an inner child advocate, because I've been a nanny for 13 years and I see it, and I want to bring that out of people, like cultivating joy, cultivating that true, curious, real, authentic self again, that we've
Mm-hmm.
had to like push aside and drowned out, and trauma has stolen things from. But cultivating that inner child again is so important. And so being able to create that space to do that is also, again, it goes back to safety, but shaming ourselves, belittling ourselves for making mistakes and doing these things or having certain thoughts or certain struggles, you are the observer of those thoughts. The person that you are is the person observing the thought. You are not, you don't have to identify with the thought unless you actively decide to. And then that begins that whole loop. So that's like part of the meditative process is you learn the thoughts are just like a cloud floating by. I don't have to attach onto them and then go down that
Mhm.
rabbit hole. I can learn to just sit with them. And then that also teaches me how to sit with emotion and not react. I can sit and I can let it happen and it will pass. I don't have to sit there and judge myself to be like, that was such a stupid thought. Or why are you always thinking about? No, it doesn't help anything. You can't shame yourself into a positive change, really. It's not really how it happens. So, compassion and curiosity, learning to be the observer instead of the judge is huge. Let's think.
That's probably
Boundaries.
three too, even.
Yeah.
The observer, not the judge.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
then definitely boundaries. Boundaries are really
Ah,
important.
boundaries. Yes.
Boundaries and communication. So boundaries, those kind of go hand in hand, but I think those are the two that I would say. Boundaries are loving invitations to intimacy. They don't keep people out. I don't say this is my boundary and you have to respect it because this is what it is. No. I'm giving you the template of how I can let you in. I'm giving you the template that makes me feel loved and safe. I am communicating that to you in a way that is fair to you. I have the words because I've spent the time to be introspective about it. I've been curious about it. I've explored it. I am being honest with that and I'm vulnerably sharing that. I'm giving you the open key to the door that you can come into this space in my life. Somebody's response to those boundaries, if they're not willing to do that, if they are belittling or invalidating you, that's data. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have set the boundary or that you shouldn't have communicated the thing. It just means they might not be able to meet you there. And that's the data you need to say this is not a safe or healthy person. And
Hmm.
I get to decide whether I'm going to continue engaging at this level of intimacy or connection with them. So that's a good thing. So you setting those standards for yourself might lead to confrontation, but that confrontation is actually what weeds out all the BS that you've been healing from and coping from. And you don't have to have in your life when you can just say, nope, this is what it is for me. I won't allow people to engage with me in a way that is disrespectful and hurtful to me. And I would love to talk with you about this, but if you're going to belittle me and say words that are whatever, then I can't have this conversation until we can have a mature dialogue. And if somebody can't have that mature dialogue, then that's showing you where they are, not that you shouldn't have said that. So I think that a lot of
Mm,
times people, especially when you
good
come from
distinction.
abuse, is like you are met with this confrontation afterwards. And so it's like I, God forbid, said something or did something that made that person mad. And so I'm scared of the confrontation. When in reality, the confrontation is showing me who that person is choosing to be in response to my reality and my experience of life. And if they're not hearing that from a place of love and desire to see and to understand and have empathy, the people we care for and the people that care for us care about our experience too. And they care about our heart. And so by setting those boundaries, look at it as data. It's data. It's not personal. It's that person in response to you as a separate person. So if they can't meet you there, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just maybe means that there should be more boundaries. There should be more space for the sake of containing. Boundaries are the container and the circle that we draw around ourselves to contain ourselves. And then we let people in when they're able to show us that they're trustworthy of that space and respecting of that space. And then communication, learning how to use your words in a way that can actually be heard and understood, and also to hear and listen. I think communication in both ways is how do we actually hear people? How do we understand? How do we ask clarifying questions? How do we actively listen? How do we create safety in conversation? That's huge because if I attack you and go at you, I might genuinely have a valid point. But if I'm coming at you, your nervous system is in defense mode. You're not listening to me. So it's like, how can I say the same thing? So much of what I do with my clients in like intensive calls is like, Lacey, I don't know how to have this conversation with my partner and I'm freaking out and whatever, and we just reframe it. So yes, what you're feeling in this freak out is I really am fearful. How do we get to the root? How do we communicate it in I statements instead of you? I feel fear. when this happens in our relationship, because it brings up this in me instead of when you do this and you always, it's like you have something valid to say, but how we say it matters, and the tone matters, and learning how to communicate is a skill. And if you haven't had people in your life doing that, you don't know how to do it. So we can get better at it. All of these things are
So
skills
true.
we can get better at. So yeah.
Such good tips. Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki, he's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he's like, communication is going to be the thing I will always invest in. Like, you can never be too good at communicating. I was like, that's
So
like
good.
a wild that he's like a billionaire. And he's like, nope, yep, I'm going to keep learning about communicating. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, I agree.
We always can do it better. It's the
Yes,
key to everything.
it is.
We always
Oh,
be in
my
communication. Yep.
all these gold nuggets just sprinkling everywhere. Thank you so much for being on the
Yeah,
podcast. I'm going to link all the
course.
stuff that you talked about today, how people can connect with you. And what a joy. What a treat.
It's so
Thank you, my
fun.
dear.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for letting me share.
Yes.